Hello, my friends. It is I, Rich Alberto, DM Philly, out here on the internet, your friendly neighborhood podcaster, back with you again to talk about The Acolyte, Episode 3, Destiny. I am very excited to be back here talking Star Wars in a galaxy far, far away. Yet again, of course, I am not alone. I am joined by my Padawan learner, the one and only Taylor Ball. Taylor, how are you?
I'm great. I did it. And hey, you should come check us out on YouTube because I got the Padawan braid this time. I'm prepared. Padawan braid.
Excellent.
And I grabbed something with a hood that was vaguely witchy, I felt. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to be on theme.
I
Might as well make it fun,
appreciate
you
it.
know?
I have a hood, and that's only because it's a
I
little
was gonna
bit.
say you're really like kind of Sith coded and
I
a little bit like
know. I
you get
tend
over
to be.
there.
It's
Like
only because it's cold and damp outside, and I'm a little chilly. I'm not even trying to misrepresent. So I'm just bundled
just a
up,
little chilly.
trying to sustain my warmth.
Not a friend of the dark side, but you are just a little cold.
Yeah, just a little cold. Easy to mix those two things up.
Yeah.
Taylor, episode 3 of The Acolyte Destiny. We got it. It's back. I'm very excited to get into it with you all, or with you in particular. But before I do, I'm going to tell everybody to go subscribe to all the stuff. There's a lot of TV coming this month. House of the Dragon is going to be dropping this weekend. I'm going to be talking about it with LaTanya Starks every week. The boys are back in town. Taylor, I'm going to be breaking that down with Kevin Mahadeo. So make sure that everybody out there is subscribed at Screen Page Pod or all of our social media feeds. There is a link tree in all of the profiles there that'll get you into the Discord to connect with us. And if you've just found this podcast and you're listening to us, push subscribe. I'd appreciate it. It helps us out, and we want you to come with us on this adventure. But all of that said, Taylor, I want to know, what did you think? First impressions, episode 3. How you feeling?
Obsessed. I'm so in love with it. It was like this episode felt like it was tailor coded.
It
I
was very tailor coded. I'm
I was so
glad that you are this unabashedly positive, because I have a couple of nits to pick,
sure,
though
sure.
I'm pretty positive on it. But
Hmm.
we will get into all the specifics. Should I give a short recap? We didn't so much last time because we were breaking down 2 episodes, but a quick recap of
Yeah.
the episode to refresh us. So we drop in, entering on a flashback. We see Osha and May at the poisonous Bunta tree. Very quickly, we learn that their relationship is strained as they're experimenting with some darker force powers on these little fairy butterflies at the tree. We meet Coral and Anastasia, the leaders of this witch coven, who seem to be offshoots of the Dathomir witches, but we'll talk more about that. The
Mhm.
4 notable Jedi are here on the planet, and they arrive at the coven just before this ascension ceremony that the girls are supposed to undergo. We learn
Mhm.
that the girls have no father, ultimately discovering that Coral is actually the one who carried them to term. And a tense discussion with the Jedi ultimately leads to the witches agreeing to have the girls tested for their force abilities by the Jedi. This testing leads to Osha admitting her desire to leave the planet, to not join the Order of Witches that her mother and sister are a part of. Anastasia acknowledges destiny isn't decided for you by an anonymous force. You get to make a choice. And she does choose. She chooses to leave, at which point her sister May finds her packing to leave home like a young Anakin Skywalker will about a century from now, Taylor. And
Mhm.
May tells Osha she cannot leave, threatening to kill her sister before she starts a fire that appears to consume the entire gigantic temple. Master Soul finds Osha just in time for us to see May fall into a bottomless chasm, places that are pretty easy to return from in Star Wars. Honestly, it's not that big of a deal.
That's true.
But ultimately, we make our way back to the Jedi ship with one side of the story of what happened here. So, right
Mhm.
off the bat, I just want to kind of ask you about this choice to use a flashback, Taylor. This has become kind of standard operating procedure, especially in genre shows, but
Yep.
science fiction genre shows. Just the TV I have talked about, like the last 12 calendar months. I'm thinking of Outer Range. I'm thinking of Fallout. I'm thinking of Foundation. I'm thinking of The Last of Us. This is what we do now, where we establish some characters and then we dive into a flashback. How did this work for you?
Honestly, I was really excited. Instead of, talking around this event that we've been told about in those first 2 episodes, we're just getting thrown right into specifically what happens, obviously from Osha's perspective. But I was really thrilled to be just thrown back to see the witches. I mean, we'll get there, but I really
We'll
thought
get
that the
into it.
flashback was effective. I liked it.
I appreciate what you're getting at too. This is something that we talked about a bit last week, which was the idea of the mystery at the heart of this thing and this
Mhm.
kind of central event that catalyzes the trajectory of May and Osha's life. I didn't want it to be this dangling participle that we weren't going to address until the end with a lot of sort of uncertainty about what happened there and them just telling us. So I appreciate them going back. Leslye Headland, the showrunner, talked about wanting to dedicate a couple of episodes to the Akira Kurosawa film Rashomon. A friend of the podcast, David, had actually sent me some feedback before the episode even dropped yesterday that he thought they were going to use this Rashomon technique of storytelling. Rashomon, Kurosawa, a very famous kind of samurai filmmaker. I'm not super familiar with his work firsthand. I'm most aware of him through discussion of his work after the fact, particularly through the analytical lens of Star Wars, Taylor, because he gets brought up a lot in this space. But
Sure.
Rashomon is this story of unreliable narrators, and we keep coming
Ooh.
back to the same event to depict it from different perspectives. And it kind of leaves us, the audience, with this uncertainty at the end of which course of events we kind of choose to put faith in, which seems the most accurate, who do we believe the most. And that's certainly what they're teasing at. I think that it's
Mhm.
really important and it's incumbent on us as we're thinking about this episode to recognize it's being told from Osha's perspective and
Yes.
from the perspective of this child. That said, Leslye Headland made a point that if we're going to tell the story about these two children, their origin's going to be important. And I
Mhm.
thought it was more dynamic and just created a little bit better energy if we introduce you to the characters before we give you their origins and kind of hook you a little bit. And I do think that worked for me to a degree, but it did kill the momentum on the pacing for me. I was
Mm.
really excited driving forward with the mystery and the kind of relevant topical urgency of the moment of
Sure.
May and Osha. And while I really appreciate that we are addressing this, part of me feels like it might have worked better in a traditional format. If this is episode 1 and I'm going
Mhm.
into the whole kind of foil without, because we spent a lot of episode 1 with this like, do you have a twin? Don't you have a twin? It feels like that space could have been used better to me. I may be really picking nits here, Taylor.
No, I think that's a very valid criticism. I think that it definitely could have worked, and just doing 16 years later instead of 16 years earlier in episode 3 would have definitely, I think, achieved a similar thing here. But introducing us to, the witches, the moms, getting that Osha and May are children that were created by magic of some sort. Um, yeah, I think that that's a very valid take there.
Yeah, I don't mean to be too critical, I
No.
just think that sometimes there's an inclination to subvert expectations for the sake of subverting them. I talk about this a lot, and
Yes.
traditional narratives have power. I appreciate the technique, and I think that it can be used to great effect. I mean, some of these other shows that I'm calling out, Outer Range, I just was talking about it within the last couple of weeks. I thought it was done really well because we're doing it in season 2 once we're really rooted into the characters and we're deeply invested in it. It's not knocking the momentum of this early story. We're so early in going here, and I'm still trying to get my hooks in the topical elements. Like
Mhm.
I missed my girl Dafne Keen, Taylor. I know
I
that like the Yord
know.
Horde is sad out there that we had to leave them behind. Listen, you may not love him, but the Yord Horde is legion.
Nah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I guess I'm like alliance against this Yord Horde business.
Did you just bring Warcraft into
I
this?
did just bring
Alliance for the Alliance.
how many things can we bring in? Because we're gonna talk about the Wheel of Time.
I
And we're gonna
know.
talk about I'm gonna bring in Warcraft. How can we bring in Lord of the Rings? Like we'll get it all in here.
this was the big reveal. I think to the point of regardless how much the mileage worked for me on
Mhm.
the placement of the episode, I do really appreciate the context and everything that we kind of explored in here. And you and I, Taylor, we cannot acknowledge this episode without addressing the elephant in the room. And that elephant are the Aes Sedai witches of the Westlands. It is the Wheel of Time. The Wheel of Time, deeply beloved over here at Screen and Page. It is very much the kind of spinal column of the nervous system that we kind of have going on in a lot of ways. And
Mhm.
if you've never engaged with the Wheel of Time, but you loved these witches and you loved everything about these episodes, then my word, do I have a treat for you, my friends. There's a 15-book epic fantasy series waiting out there that is extremely your shit. But this is so Wheel of Time. The Wheel of Time is a epic fantasy story
Mhm.
that is driven by these binary ideas of the light and the dark, Taylor, driving forth kind of all of the action and the conflict across this epic fantasy stage. And the players that are central to the games of the Wheel of Time are the Aes Sedai witches who weave the threads of the pattern. And so
Mhm.
all of this coding here, I mean, it's pretty broadly symbolic in ways
Yeah.
that you and I have talked about a lot with the Wheel of Time. This idea of a thread being part of a greater tapestry. These are traditionally feminine roles, the role of weaving, being
Mhm.
tasked to sit Rapunzel style at the loom, right? And
Yeah.
like spin the flax. And so, in that way, I think it's a really interesting kind of assertion of matriarchal power and a
Mhm.
recontextualization of these kind of classic themes.
Yeah.
But this whole notion of the force as the thread, honestly, I'm just a little too old and pedantic that I have to wrinkle my nose at this. Like, can't
Oh
we
my
just call it the force? Can't we call it the force? But I did appreciate what they were going for here,
No,
you
it's
know?
spite. She can't call it the Force because the Jedi call it the Force,
I
so
know.
they have to call it something else. No, it's wonderful. I love this whole but yeah, the weaving of it all, this sort of like feminine position. I mean, we have it in mythology everywhere, right? Like the three
Mhm.
fates that like weave for like Greek mythology and everything. It's so freaking cool. I was so literally when Mother Anastasia is like giving them their lesson, like she has this like force thread in her hand. It's so it made me so happy. And yes, just the Wheel of Time is so deep. And I mean, it's clearly ingrained in you, Rich, very deeply. And I am just a Padawan of the Wheel of Time universe. How many crossovers can I get in here? Um, but yeah, I love it. The
I
thread of
knew you
fate,
would.
destiny.
I knew you would. So, I like a lot of the training stuff we see. We
Mhm.
see May and Osha, and I had talked a little bit last time about how it felt to me like they were already kind of signaling, telegraphing to us that the light and the dark may not be where we expected, that we saw these kind of dark instincts in May as we're gonna leave episode 2 with her taking a shot at her long lost sister
Mhm.
and the way that kind of May is so like desperate for the reunion. And so we see this inversion. I mean, it opens, we're underneath this big Bunta tree, Taylor, which
Yes.
very notably, we killed one of these 4 Jedi last episode using Bunta poison.
Yeah.
And we have Mother Anastasia talking about hunting with the Bunta in the winter. This
Mhm.
feels relevant, maybe, given that we're going to leave this temple with a lot of dead people at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how much to connect there, but in this little introduction, we get these kind of butterfly sprites, these little like
Yeah.
fairy pixies at the tree, and we see the 2 girls. I mean, in my mind, in my Star Wars training, this is some dark sidey type of stuff. And I think
Mm.
that in a way we can look at May comes in and grabs the thing and is holding it. And Osha gets so upset, let it go, let it go. But Osha had kind of done the same thing, except first she calls it down to land on her finger. And this is a
Mhm.
notion we've not seen in a lot of the Star Wars main canon films, but it exists in all of the extended kind of zeitgeist, this animal empathy as a very kind of light
Mm.
side coded force ability that is all across Star Wars. It's a really big deal in Star Wars Rebels, comes to great prominence.
I
So
didn't know that. That's
yeah,
really
it's
cool.
It's a big thing. There's a little bit of Rey doing it in the sequel trilogy, but I know
Mm.
that people get very turned off as soon as you say sequel trilogy or Rey. But I got a little bit of that from Osha, of the way that like
Yes.
Osha's engaging with the thing almost in a like calling it to her, drawing this life to her. And May comes in and like grabs it and is controlling it and wielding it. And it feels very charged. Right off the rip, you sense the tension in these two kids.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell, I mean, being a sister of two, at least when I was growing up, there's always the one that kind of wants to go on their own path and the one who's like, "No, follow the straight and narrow, do what our parents say and like don't deviate from the path." And May, I think honestly like somewhat not necessarily surprising, but a part of me was like, "Oh, May is the rebel, like
Mhm.
she's like getting into trouble." But no, May is the one that is like dedicated to being a witch and her mother and the coven. And Osha, while she wants to be like present with her family, she wants this adventure. She wants to see the galaxy. She doesn't want to be trapped in this like fortress and hiding for her whole life. But May has an anger that is very, I feel like, present in like our Anakin, which the dark side can easily sort of take advantage of, and that anger will can feed that sort of dark side force energy. So, and it's, I mean, it's clearly present in May because her anger got the best of her, and she burned down her home and tried to kill her sister. So,
Did
like,
she? Did she though? It's such a question that I have. First, you invoke his name. So let's stop down and
yes.
talk about it because you addressed it a little bit already. We come to learn that Coral, not Anastasia, was the mother who carried these two children
Mhm.
to term, which is very fascinating. Coral is a Zabrak, the like
Mhm.
horns on their faces is Darth Maul's kind of
Yes.
alien race, which I know that you talked about. You watched Clone Wars and it was kind of
Mhm.
second monitor for you. Do you remember any of the Dathomir witches stuff?
A little bit, yes.
There's a whole kind of
Yeah,
Darth
yeah.
Maul arc there. Darth Maul comes from Dathomir.
Mhm.
Dathomir is this particular planet with this coven of witches that are very kind of set upon by the Jedi, though they're very firmly dark side users. There's a
Yeah,
lot of shady stuff going
yeah.
on there amongst the Night Sisters. The Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor games, we deal with Dathomir. There's a
Oh,
great
cool.
Dathomirian witch that becomes a kind of NPC slash main character in the ensemble in Marin, who is fantastic and kind of beloved across the fandom. So it feels like these witches are kind of like an offshoot of that. Leslye Headland talked very openly about being deeply inspired by the Dathomir stuff from the Clone Wars series and saying
Cool.
she was going to take her shot. If she's getting greenlit on a Star Wars show, she's doing witches somehow, some
Yes.
way. So it was kind of cool to see that. But Anakin, who, when we meet Shmi and when Qui-Gon Jinn asks about his father, she kind of gives this very interesting response. Whatever happened, I don't know, but he doesn't have a father. And
Yeah.
we will learn the same of these two girls. So I'm going to ask you, do you remember the term virgins in the Force? Have you ever heard of this? Is this familiar?
Where was it mentioned that I would have known it?
It's mentioned in relation to Anakin's conception. I mean, Anakin's conception with no father. This is very much the Immaculate Conception. It's
Right,
Jesus and
yes.
Mary stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But so Qui-Gon talks about it as a virgins in the Force. A virgins is
Oh.
kind of like virgin, but not so lonely. But so of the virgins in the Force is a consolidation of the Force
Right.
around a person or a place
Yes, okay.
potentially. So there are notable places in Star Wars canon that are considered vergences in the Force. One
Mhm.
of those places we talk about all the time, Taylor, and we don't talk about Star Wars all the time. So I think that you know what it is.
It says, I'm scared to guess. I'm so
You
scared
can
to guess.
guess. You can
Is it
guess.
is it Dagobah?
It's the cave in Dagobah.
Okay, hell yeah.
It's the
Alright, let's
cave
go.
in
Let's go.
Dagobah, right? And it's this idea that this is a kind of dark side vergence in the Force, that Luke goes in
Hmm.
there and the Force is so powerful that he's kind of confronted with it and has to address it. We're going to see it again in the sequel trilogy. In Last Jedi, Rise of Sky, it's Last Jedi, when Rey's training with Luke on
Mhm.
Octo is maybe that fancy planet with the porgs or whatever and the weird monks, but she goes down into a gigantic gaping pit in the earth. Do you remember?
Yes.
Like, yes. Okay.
Yes, I do. Yep.
So these witches, as they are preparing for this ascension ritual, are standing, Taylor, in front of a giant gaping pit in the
Mhm.
side of this mountain. Now, when you start to do a little bit of like homework on virginses, you see places like Dagobah infested with life. It's a swamp teeming with life and bugs and plants. Even Octo, this water planet with all of like the
Mhm.
water life and overflowing and green, green, green. Like
Yeah.
we don't see a virgins in the forest at a place like Tatooine or a place like
Right.
Coruscant that are like barren and devoid of life, right? But these places filled with this natural, teeming, effervescent, overwhelming life are where we
Yes.
tend to find them.
I was
So
gonna
it's
say, as we pull into the episode, it is absolutely gorgeous. It is like this stunning, like forested region with this little like ruin of some sort, like set in the middle of things. So that, yeah, that tracks.
yeah, the ruin was very cool. It seems like almost
I
like
know.
this
I want to know what it
shattered
is.
column, this
Yeah.
fortress that had been like almost blown apart. But that's me like ranting about the virgins in the forest because we get to this idea of like the Immaculate Conception. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that this could be. This could be somehow Palpatine returned, dark cloning, weirdness. This could be like Darth Plagueis the Wise
Mhm.
prequel lead up stuff. I know.
So, oh my gosh,
Yes.
I'm so glad that you said that because have been racking my brain all week. I was trying to remember in the
The
Star Wars risk.
story of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Well, is the guy who moves across the risk board Dark Plagueis, or is it doesn't it start with an S? I've been saying Darth Sagittarius for a week, and I haven't looked it up because it was more funny to
Darth Sagittarius is now canon. I think that you're talking about Emperor Palpatine, Sheev
No.
Palpatine.
No, it's is it Sidious? Is it Darth Sidious? Is that a thing? Is that a
Yeah,
person? Okay,
yes.
that's what I'm thinking of. Wow, okay, great. It
I
took me a week
love
to get there, and I
that
figured
Darth
it out right now.
Sidious just
God
became Darth
damn it.
Sagittarius.
Oh my
Very
god. I'm so
fascinating.
upset that, like, it took oh my gosh. Anyway,
We're
great, tangent,
learning,
sorry.
Taylor. No, it's fine.
I
I
pulled it
but
from my
so
brain.
nonetheless,
Yep.
this whole idea of the virgins and the force, it seems to me like they're doing some real dark force ritual magic. When they go up for this ascension ceremony, we see these twin moons overlapping in the sky, the red and blue moons. Here's where I'm going to throw some shade. The
Mm.
chanting, Taylor, the chanting,
I
like
wanted it to
lose
be
me
so
with
much
the chanting.
cooler, man. The music was so good, and I was so in on the scene, and then they start chanting, and I'm like, "There wasn't a cooler, like, phrase that we
I
could
know.
picked
And
here?"
then they
Like,
even went to the whole trouble of having like a choral,
I
like
know.
piece overlaid with the endemic chanting. It just was like a catastrophic failure. It wasn't that bad when she said it to them in the midst of the lesson,
Yes.
right? The
Agreed.
power of one, the power of two, the power of many. As a turn of phrase to kind of convey the idea, it works. But at the point that we're just
Yes.
repeating it and we have maniacal laughter, closed caption.
That killed me. It was so
This was some real, like, over the top Star Warsian, like, oh my God, you guys brought the cheese. You are
They did.
serving the cheese alongside your Star Wars this week. This
Yes.
is not working for me whatsoever.
No, I wanted to so it was so cool when everybody like, if there was no sound, it would probably be cooler because
Even if they
everybody's
were
doing
just chanting some unintelligible
I was gonna
gibberish,
say, like, put it in a different language, like, anything to just, like, to spice it up a little bit
you
because
could have had them
nobody's doing
chanting
this.
pig Latin,
Literally.
Leslye Headland. What did you do there?
That killed me. I
I'm
wanted to
really
love it.
relieved that you're not like, "Oh, you are being such a stick in the mud,"
No,
because I
I
came in
wanted
very worried about how much I dislike the chanting.
I wanted to love it so bad. I was just like, "You guys, like, the music is epic, like, we're standing on this like, the edge of this pit, there was, like, the eclipse, like, oh my gosh, can we please" what are we chanting right now? Like, this isn't cool. I'm
I
sorry.
I'm just glad I'm not alone. I'm really glad that I'm not alone. But
Ugh.
so the ceremony is going to be interrupted, and in the
Mhm.
midst of the ceremony, Anase is talking about this ceremony that we haven't done since we came here and we created life and now we're going to do it again. And the Jedi, I do have to say, so, part of the exploration of this show is that we're going to be exploring the kind of paradox, the hubris, the fall of the Jedi through their pride in many ways. And I
Mhm.
do expect to examine them with a pretty critical lens. But I was really relieved because I think that sometimes the Jedi get painted in the modern era as just this unambiguous, like completely unnuanced sort of order that is only toxic. And I don't think that that's a fair read. I've been thinking a lot recently, Taylor, of The Wire, as I throw this word around a lot and I don't want to rob power, but The Wire is a legitimate masterpiece of television. I mean, it's the Mount Rushmore of TV. It's about as good as you can hope to ever achieve. And it is fundamentally a 5-season story that is an analysis of the failing of systems and of the kind of corruption that becomes latent and systemic failures that then influence people with the best of intentions, right? It's a
Mhm.
story that's tracking the drug trade in Baltimore. And so we're introduced to a lot of police
Whoa.
officers. And in a
Okay.
lot of ways, the Jedi are the space cops of Star
Mhm.
Wars, and they serve as this kind of law enforcement arm of the Republic. And I think that there are really fair critiques that we can level at them and examine. And I'm really excited to see the ways that it might be explored going forward here, right? But
Mhm.
I'm so appreciative that they didn't do the bad space cop thing of like kick the door down and yank the
Yes.
children out from these women's arms, right? They came in with a bit of dignity and addressed these people with respect. That said, I will acknowledge that they're spying on them, that they have
Yeah.
come to this place and are spying on them surreptitiously, and that they arrive in the middle of what is clearly a very important kind of religious ceremony. And there
Mhm.
does seem to be an intention to interrupt said ceremony, Taylor.
Yes. Yeah,
So
for
I,
sure.
I just want to make sure I'm kind of putting all that up out front
Mhm.
because I think that my instinct in going through the rest of the season is often going to be to speak in ways that are a bit defensive about the Jedi because I like the idea that there's something virtuous there and there's something to aspire to and something noble about that. And I think that there's this eternal kind of push and pull. What's so brilliant about The Wire is the way that it's able to explore how these people with the absolute best of intentions go into these callings, professions when they're young and idealistic. And then they age. And much like
Yep.
Anastasia will say, we change with the seasons and you're going to
Mhm.
change with the seasons of your life. And someday you're going to have to kind of reconcile this choice you made as a young person. But
Mhm.
ultimately, the Wire does this fantastic job of looking at how good people can be poisoned by bad systems and how you can have the best of intentions and still be a redeemable individual who's participating in an irredeemable process, a
Yep.
broken system, who's perpetuating the kind of disenfranchisement that you're trying to actively fight against by participating. And I think that
Mhm.
that paradox is what makes it so brilliant. And so I hope that we can get there with the Acolyte. And I feel like we've started to lay some groundwork to do that in a pretty compelling way.
Yeah, I'm really curious because I feel like I will definitely also lean toward defending the Jedi, at least the Jedi that are out in the field. I feel like the Jedi that are dealing with people face to face, as in kind of any situation, it's very easy to point fingers and make decisions based on just words, right? If you're not looking at the situation in front of you, it's easy to just make a decision without considering every option, every angle of and to lack empathy. But I think Soul in particular here, I'm going to like defend him with my life because I
Yes.
love him. But, if we cut back to Vanestra, right? Like in those first 2 episodes, like, I don't know, her intentions feel like they're just a bit uh frigid. It's very sterile. She's making decisions based on just where she sits back in Coruscant and isn't considering necessarily what they're dealing with out, not sitting in their pretty little palace in the city. Um, so I think I'm a pretty optimistic person, and I'm
Yes, you
going
are.
to really I don't want these like 4 Jedi to have done something horrible. I really, obviously we see all of these witches supposedly dead when we leave them, and poor Osha and May see their coven, their mother, dead. And but I do think that either it was some sort of something to do with the poison, maybe something like that has to do with the magic that was being channeled or something. But I don't think that it was violence. I got to be honest.
Interesting. So we'll talk about it a little bit more because I got some strong theories here, and I'm
Yeah.
curious what kind of mileage you think they have. But in terms of the Jedi, I really appreciate what you're identifying because that's part of what I was kind of crystallizing this morning. Look, the commentary around this show is polarized. It is not a pleasant place to be wading into. I'll say that. But our Discord at Screen and Page is awesome. Everybody is very positive and
Yeah, we're
friendly.
kind
And
of
so
nice and just talk about stuff and like
I,
have different opinions, and
I
it's
was
great.
scrolling through a lot of the feedback this morning, and there was a lot of bit of discourse,
Mhm.
from our friend Brendan Fitzpatrick about the kind of hypocrisy of the Jedi showing
Mhm.
up, like, oh, you're training children here. Republic law says you can't train children. Only the Jedi are kind of allowed to train children in force
Mhm.
sensitivity. And so that's got some dark illusions about
Yes.
indoctrination in like a state kind of law enforcement agency in certain ways.
Mhm.
But the flip side is that I think exactly the same thing is happening with the witches. No matter how kind of compelling or charismatic we find what they're doing, they are fundamentally indoctrinating these children into a like radical zealotry kind of religion, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, they're both asking the same sacrifice in different ways. Like the
Mhm.
sacrifice asked of May to join the coven is that you will never go to see the world. You will never be able to pursue your own personal desires in that way.
Mhm.
And I think it just gets at the heart of this conflict that is really compelling grist for the mill when we're talking about
Yeah.
drama, which is the cost for peace. Right. The idea that, this is to get very idiosyncratic and kind of personal. When I run a Dungeons and Dragons game for 5 people, I can make sure that those 5 people's needs are always being addressed. When I run a Dungeons and Dragons game for 55 people, the needs become very different. The larger the population gets, the more concerned you have to be with the people who are disenfranchised, the people who
Mhm.
are the weakest among us, who have the least voice and the smallest capacity to affect change for themselves. And so oftentimes when you're in a position of leadership there, you have to make choices that feel punitive to the
Mhm.
most engaged participants, to those people that signed up with the best of intentions. And I know I'm talking about a D&D game and I'm getting maybe a little close to home for some of us about some of what I'm addressing here, but you get what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
This idea of the cost for peace, right? To have safety, we must sacrifice personal freedom. Where are those lines? It's
Mhm.
something that in my adult life, in the fallout of 9/11, has been a perpetual point of discourse kind of nationally for the US. And it's something I'm constantly thinking about as a person who does world building of my own and does storytelling in these kind of open sandboxes in my D&D games. And so I love what they're nibbling at here.
Yeah.
And but I think that you hit the nail on the head for me, which is these 4 Jedi that are part of this television show. Like, so I'll be okay if I learn that one or two of them had like one made a bad decision and one maybe wasn't as good as we thought they were to begin with, but they can't all be irredeemable at the end of
Yes.
I
Yeah,
need some
exactly.
of them to retain their personal integrity and their honor and to at least be able to acknowledge the kind of hypocrisy within the
Mhm.
Jedi system. The Jedi don't take children, but also we'd like to take your children, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, and Soul even said it that what he was tested when he was 8, I believe, or 4 even.
Yes,
Like,
because Osha's old. Anakin was
yes.
old. This is old. Like, it's very rare. Part of what Soul's getting at is you have a choice. I
I
didn't.
didn't. Yeah. Yeah. It's like heartbreaking, man. And it's so interesting too because we see like I'm just so intrigued because these Anastasia says it when her and supposedly her partner of some sort in
Which that's another one. This is not at all on Leslie Headland, but come on, Disney. Can we like just stop? Can we just call things
right,
what
can we
they
just
are?
like
Can we just put it
be
out
clear
there?
about it? Mother Coral, is that I believe I'm saying that correctly?
You are. Yep.
Great, perfect. So, um, they're when they're arguing and Coral's like, "I carried them," and Mother Anastasia says, "I created them." So, there must be a purpose for these children, right? Like, what was the purpose? If they're we're talking about destiny, we're talking about threads, they want them to be part of this coven, this ascension, whatever this is.
Mhm.
Like, what's the intention? What's the intention? Like, I feel like they're not just having children, like, to just have them. Like, they were created, which kind of implies that they are going to be used for some sort of greater purpose in the future.
I think that part of the context clues we have here, there's no other children, right? We
Yeah.
have Mother Anastasia talking about how they were driven from their homeland and they came here and they were dying, but they performed this miracle and created life, right? So I think it's a little bit of repopulating their line with force
Sure.
users in a way. But what's the specific intention? You do have to wonder, right? What
Yeah.
was the goal here? Anastasia has this line, the thread connected you before you were born. So
Mhm.
that creates this question of what was her intention when she created this life? Did she intend to make two separate entities? I mean, twins iconic in Star Wars, right?
Yes.
We gotta love it. The Force dyad a little less popular, certainly, but it's a dynamic that I think is relevant and at play. I mean, certainly all of the modern Star Wars shows are addressing the material of the sequel trilogies in a big way, whether we're here for it or not. It's part of the zeitgeist. It is part of the canon, right? So this notion of them as a force dyad being like inexorably kind of bound to one
Mhm.
another and this amplification of their power that we get leading to this ceremony of ascension, like not since we like NSA is saying, presumably, and it gets a little lost because the Jedi show up and the ceremony gets interrupted and then it's the next day and we don't really talk about it, but it feels like this is a very important moment in time, this night, this alignment of the moons, this ceremony happening here. Why have we waited so long to do it? So I do
Mhm.
have a lot of questions about
Yes.
what the goal was there, but ultimately those we will have to wait to get answers to, I think.
Mhm.
I want to talk a little bit about Coral because you addressed her, because I think that, I give this whole diatribe about the Jedi and how don't judge them too harshly. They've been tasked with a really unenviable role, is kind of my grand perspective. Not to say that we shouldn't judge them at all, but part of the critique that we always have for them is this notion that we really are critical of now, that you can't have personal attachments, that you're supposed to
Mhm.
sever all of your personal attachments. And that's wrong, right? Like
Yeah.
love is important. It drives us, it connects us. We can all accept that and say, like, come on, Jedi, don't be such idiots. But there is a point of unhealthy attachment. There is
Yes.
codependency. There is fixation and stalking and all of these manifestations of really unhealthy attachment. And I think that we see it in May, certainly,
Mhm.
in the way that why do you always come to the tree, Osha? Why are you always running off alone? Why are you trying to have any independence?
Yep.
And Osha saying, but we're not the same. Yes, we are. Like, that's
Yeah.
some toxic codependency if I've ever seen it, my friends.
It's clearly like May's like control tactic, right? Is to just keep Osha in this box, which is that she's a twin and she is not her own person. They are the same.
I think that's very fair, but I think that part of what I then ask is, where does she learn this? And I look to Coral, who
Yeah.
embodies a lot of the same fear, Taylor. She is
Mhm.
so afraid, right? She's afraid of what's going to happen to the children. She's afraid of May not being strong enough. She's so resistant. And we get the whole thing of Anase being incredibly awesome.
Ugh.
Destiny isn't decided for you by an anonymous force. You get to make a choice. If you want to
Mhm.
pull the thread, then pull it. And then she notes the stinger. Fear should not make this decision, Osha. And that's the
Yes.
part that I really love. A little bit of like Dune, Fear is the Mind Killer. I love that show. I
Mhm.
love
Sure, sure, sure.
it. And so, but Coral does not seem to be on the same page, Taylor. Anastasia says, we're all going to go talk, and what you have said will weigh on what I tell them. But
Mhm.
presumably, the decision is not Anastasia's alone. And like notably in that moment when the sisters are separated, Coral just grabs May and drags her out of the room.
Yep, and May's literally kicking and screaming.
And the next time we see May, let us
Oh my
know. She walks in like, by the way, you're not going anywhere. I'm going to kill you. And then starts a fire,
It's
which
so
seems to me like not really what this little girl was like before the scary or scary witch mom just
Mhm.
pulled her off for timeout.
Yeah, Coral's not gentle, right? I mean, obviously, we meet her in the beginning, and it's almost like, oh, they're calling her Mother Coral, but is she actually like a motherly role? And we find out that yes, she certainly is. But Coral's bad cop and Anastasia is good cop, right? Like this duo clearly has two sides to it, and Coral is the hard, stern, she's she's the no BS side of things and doesn't let these kids get away with a lot. Where Anastasia is this very supportive, understanding, kind of more affectionate mother. Um, which I have to say, I like teared up during this episode. It like really
Yes.
got me, man. It hit me so hard. First, there was twice. It was like twice in a row with the like double punch there. But when Osha goes into the ship to be tested for the Jedi, right? And May's like, "Promise me, like you're gonna lie. Like you can't tell the truth." And the way that they say it, like Osha's like, "I want to say what's in my heart. Like I don't want to lie." And that I was like,
The
"Oh,
kid actors
oh,
extraordinary,
so
actual
good."
twin sisters, Lauren and Leah Brady. It's a
Amazing.
pretty tough role, and I made a lot of fun of little Leia when she was running away from Flea back on Obi-Wan, and I think Vivian St. Clair, I think is her name, was actually delightful as an
Oh,
actress, but it's sometimes hard to put these kids in the spot, and I
yeah.
thought the kids carried weight, up until the point that they're yelling at each other, "What did you do? What did you do?" And I'm a little bit like, "All right, kids," but they nailed it for me. There's a lot of acting.
I was gonna say, like, the fighting, the sibling fighting, I thought was pretty good because as somebody who had a sister that was not much younger than me, only 16 months younger than me, we fought constantly. And we even got in this episode them being forced to hold hands and tell each other they love each other, which I had to do so many times, sit on the couch and my dad would sit there and say, hug each other and mean it and say I love you. And it's just the worst.
Very notable in the back and forth of like, what's wrong with you? The yelling back and forth
Oh,
at each other. Like that resonates with me. How many times have I had people in my family with the like absolute like vitriolic spewing fire? What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like you're an incorrect person. But I interrupt you. You were talking about when Saul is with her, testing her on the ship.
right. Right. So yeah, so May, quote unquote, like fails the test or at least like lies successfully, it seems. And then Osha goes in and sort of accidentally gives up that she's lying a little bit because she's lying. And then it's like And Soul's like, "Oh yes, correct." She's like, "That's not correct. What am I
Master Soul
saying?"
baits are pretty good.
So
He's pretty
good.
good. It's a real good bait and switch of the 8-year-old.
I
Very
love it.
notably, Lee Jung-jae, the actor here, again, Korean actor, learned English for this role. He was
Oh,
really overwhelmed by taking this role on. And I was really emotionally affected by that scene as well, but
yes.
more so on the part of him. I thought that he just conveys so much kind of empathy and
Yes.
kind of support, and it's not through the language. No insult to this
No.
man. I give him all of the kudos in the world for undertaking the
Mhm.
journey to try to take on English, but you can tell this is not his first language. And there's such kind of pathos in the delivery that I was like, oh man, this is great. I'm getting like verklempt just talking about it now. Like it
It
really
kills
was
me,
an
man.
emotionally effective scene, you know?
It's just so important. He's just in the most it's not nefarious. He's not trying
No,
to tempt her into anything. He's just like, you need to speak what's in your heart. You need to have the courage to tell the truth and say what you want. And it's so important because if you don't do that in life, you miss out on the things that you want to do. And Osha is being held back by May specifically because with the I'm talking about the 1-2 punch here, Soul really got me here. This sort of really passionate and genuine delivery. He's just trying to like you said, he didn't have a choice. He was tested so young, and here Osha has this choice. But then we cut, and Osha comes back and is talking to Mother Anastasia and is telling them that she wants to be a Jedi. And like she finds this courage to say what she wants. May's pissed and gets crazy, and like you said, like Mother Coral like takes her away. But Anastasia, against everything that you would expect, is supportive and understanding. And Osha's like, I'll never see you again. She says, "No, you won't." But like, oh my gosh, it absolutely killed me. I was like, don't do I can't do unconditional love and supportive parents. I can't do it. It fucking kills me. Oh my gosh. It was so good. It was so good.
I thought it would get you. That whole especially, you
Oh,
have to have the courage to say the
yes.
truth. Like, that's a hard one, man. That's a really hard one. That one resonates with me so powerfully in so many different ways across my life. And I think, to the Star Wars of it all, sometimes we all get a little bit lost in the weeds with the fact that, like, fundamentally, these are parables for kids. This is how the whole thing started out.
Yes.
And this is the kind of stuff that I really like
Oh,
included in my Star Wars. There's a
yeah.
lot of people out there yelling and crying about how the Acolyte has irrevocably destroyed Star Wars. And I call bullshit, my friends. At the end of the day,
Gosh.
just like every other piece of Star Wars before and after it, there is good, there is bad, and there is some gold in them hills if you're willing to wade through the cheese to find it. Ultimately,
Mhm.
I feel you, Taylor. The Anastasia bead of, seizing control of your destiny, it doesn't totally flow with me, because the reality is there are moments in your life that are completely beyond your control. There
Mhm.
are powers that be that you have no kind of will over. The reality is that if the Jedi don't show up here, May doesn't get a choice, or Osha doesn't get a choice. This
Yeah.
is what she is indoctrinated into. And in that same way that I think Soul is commenting on it in such a pointed way that we've been talking about a lot for years, the Jedi come and take these children away from their parents, but the parents do generally have to hand the children over, right? And
Mhm.
and does that make it okay? Does it make it okay if Osha chooses? If she's an 8-year-old? Like, who's in the wrong here? And what I
Mhm.
really love is all the shades of gray. There's just no clear
Yes.
lines, right? Like Anastasia, we can empathize, but we're also a little bit like, you got to let your kid go be who she wants to be. And
Mm.
we can empathize with Soul, for he's not giving her a bit when he's on the ship, but he does give her the really cool lightsaber and is like, you
Yeah.
would make a terrific Jedi. Jedi.
Yeah.
Insert recruitment speech here. You know what I mean? And so
Yes.
I think there's a lot of complexity to unpack that it sets the nuance up in a really interesting way. And to the beginning of this conversation, I think it puts us up for a really interesting exploration of a different perspective of these events through the Rashomon lens, right? Because we have the kind of frantic breakout through the end. And I think that on a first watch, you could take it at face value of May going over the edge, because I
Mhm.
think that even if you're a discerning Star Wars viewer, you can follow the path of fear, and it leads to
Yes.
hate, and it leads to suffering, and it leads to the dark side. And there is that happening with May, and we can track it. But I think that there is a read here that Mother Coral, whose body was not amongst the copious dead at the end,
Oh.
may in fact be doing some really shady shit, Taylor. Because lest we forget, in episode 1, when Osha's having flashbacks of May, she sees May with the black shaded out eyes. And in the middle of that conflict,
Yes.
when the Jedi show up, Anastasia grabs hold of Torben and
Yeah.
it's like, by the way, I'm going to murder your Padawan. Which, can I note, like, I don't know Anastasia that well. We only got her for this half hour, but it did feel a little out of character with the way the
Well,
rest
did
of.
she threaten to kill him or just was like, you need to leave or I won't give him back his mind?
Yeah, she didn't threaten to kill him. You're right. She threatened to cast Feeble Mind, which is
Yes.
pretty bad.
It's not pretty
But
bad.
she was like, if you want your Padawan to get his right mind back, leave right now.
Yes.
And so it's just interesting. Like, and for the second time, Taylor, we heard about Jedi mind tricks.
Yes.
Last time it was our boy Manny Jacinto was talking about it. I think with May, right? Or with Saul, don't use your Jedi mind tricks on it. In this one, it's Mother Coral. No. They tricked Osha with their Jedi mind tricks. And so it just feels like there's a lot of ingredients of like poison tree. There were a lot of dead witches right there that didn't seem to be on fire,
Mhm. Yes.
I don't know, Taylor. I got
I
questions.
know. I was gonna say it's really interesting because there's the moment when the Jedi do show up, and Coral is ready to just straight up attack them.
Yes, she is. She has a
Yeah.
big, mean weapon and is like,
Yes.
let's go for it.
And most of the coven is with her. Like, and it takes Anastasia to calm them all down. And it feels like maybe Anastasia doesn't have her arms fully around the coven like maybe she thinks she does, or that they led her to believe. And maybe that Coral, there was some like maybe not full on mutiny, but maybe Coral had a bit more of control and influence over the coven than Anastasia had noticed before, and maybe her hubris of being this leader of the coven.
Yeah,
Um
that's an interesting read. I'm really curious. I think that it's going to really bear a lot of weight this next episode. Leslye Headland has said episode 5 is the one that everybody's going to be talking about. I think we can only imagine that next episode will be some mirrored reflection of these events from a different perspective, from the Jedis, from Maze, from Anastasia's. I'm really wondering whether or not we're going to spend a whole nother like set of time just here in the past. Like, I do really want to get back to the contemporary timeline. I like those characters and I want to follow them forward and kind of resolve where they're at. I buried the lead here, but Carrie Ann Moss, baby, we got the Carrie Ann Moss episode. That I was very happy about.
You're gonna be so happy about that. Once I saw Flashback, I was like, oh, okay. So Carrie Ann Moss is gonna be present for a little bit longer than maybe we anticipated.
Not enough Kelnaka, but the Kelnaka we did get was awesome. He appears to shave his head, Taylor.
I was gonna say, I feel like I've never seen a Wookiee with a shaved head before.
No, there's some Wookiees in the prequels where, Yoda's back on Kashyyyk and they have like braids and cool stuff going on in their hair. But I don't think we've ever seen one with shaved hair before. And it seems like he's even got some paint maybe or some
Yeah.
tattoos on the side of his head. But it's such a small thing, but I really, really love that scene of Osha like going to say
Yep.
hello to the Wookiee. And he's
Yeah.
working on like the speeder bike that's all banged up. Like everything about the Jedi ship out in that field, all of the sound design, like, oh my
Gorgeous.
God. As the Jedi walk into the witch council, we get the little Japanese flute. Like, it was so
The
dope,
music was
man.
really beautiful. I
Really good.
loved it.
I don't want to get like too paint by numbers formulaic. Like I know we got the driving action of the temple collapsing at the end, but I did miss the set piece. Like I would have
Yeah.
liked some action, The force training was neat. The Buddha tree was really beautiful. The fire was, orange, but like I'm here for some duels, Taylor. I want some duels.
I think we'll get there. I think
I'm
we'll
gonna
get
bide my
there.
time for the duels.
Yeah, hang in there. Just hang in there.
Okay, I'll bide my time for the duels. It seemed like as we're kind of winding down, there was some very pagan versus Christian coding happening here too, in terms of like the monotheistic state-sponsored religion coming in to shut down the cell of, tribal heathens out here in the backwoods.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of interesting stuff going on that I thought.
Yeah, it very much so. I mean, for any Dragon Age fan out there, it's just the knights, the Templars going out to find the apostates, witches, right? Like it feels very classic, kind of head to head that we're dealing with here. But I will say, while we're talking about beautiful things, Anastasia is absolutely stunning. I was wondering who this woman in our like big promo picture was going to be. I assumed that it would probably be the twins' mother,
Mhm.
but she is absolutely stunning. Her hair, the weaving that had to go into this hairpiece, I can only imagine took hours and hours and hours. She's wearing it as a scarf when we first see her. It is absolutely stunning. She's beautiful, very Storm rich.
Yeah, she is extraordinarily Storm. I would 100% endorse casting Jodie Turner-Smith as Storm in the X-Men live action movie.
Yes,
Do it. Don't fuck around. Just do it. So Jodie
absolutely.
Turner-Smith, she's not an actress whose work I was super familiar with prior to this. Notably, this episode and next episode are directed by this guy named Kogonada, who originally got to start doing video essays on YouTube and then had a couple of really
Ooh.
successful film releases. But he did a movie called After Yang in 2021, starring Jodie Turner-Smith. So this was a little bit of a reunion for them, which was fun. I think that they clearly got the best out of each other in certain ways. Like she was extraordinary, and I've already seen Twitter of time like banging the drums, like Rafe. Get her on the show. It doesn't even matter. This woman is an Aes Sedai. Notably, the tattoos that she's wearing, it's a
Yes.
yin yang. It is a yin yang. It is all like enunciated with these extra dots. But the yin yang is the fundamental symbol of the Aes Sedai and the Wheel of Time. It is so coded. It really feels over. She was stunning, and I thought she gave an excellent performance. Sometimes you bring in one of these big role players for an episode like this in Mando or whatever it is, and it doesn't land as great as it could. I'm not specifically calling out Jack Black. I liked that one, but I know a lot of people were a bit put off. But I thought this was a really great deployment of a 1 episode question mark 2 episode character.
Yeah. I just adore her. I think the acting was perfect. Her presence, she really took up the room. Very, very Aes Sedai. And just the little beats, especially when the girls are getting ready for the ascension ceremony. The women are working on their hair and like twisting their braids and their like little locks there, which I thought is just I just a little thing about me. One thing that I will consume content wise on the app known as TikTok is these black women braiding their hair for hours. I am so fascinated by it. I think that it is such an art, and I'm so impressed by the time that they take. And I one day can only hope my little like little stupid little Padawan brain that I did here took me like 3 tries and it's really bad. One day I would really love to learn this like weaving. It is such a art form and a process, and I just have so much respect for it. And I just love it when I talked about it a little bit in Willow, Rich. The hair, just the paying attention to this curly like hair routine that needs to happen, the sort of upkeep. Notably, you, Rich, had dreads for a long time.
I feel your pain, curly hair family. Yeah, I had some thoughts about the hair choices as a white guy who had dreads for like 20 plus years of my life, but I'll just keep them to myself. They don't matter. Yeah. I love their hair. I thought it looked extraordinary. That's pretty much there was the bit of me that's like, man, I had dreads for 15 years and they were like dragging against the back of my knees after that long. Like this girl's hair should be way longer 10 years later. But also, what do I know about the way that these young women are styling their hair? No comment. I rescind all of my further complaints.
What kind of hair growth do force babies have?
I did
Can't be normal.
The design, the styling was beautiful. There was something, it's so stupid, to the simple tunics that May and Osha were wearing. They have this blue green coating. It's so 80s to me, Taylor. Like, I have pictures of me in pullover sweatshirts, and I even have a vest from like 1983 that belonged to my aunt that is like exactly those shades of blue and green. It really like pulled me back to like Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars, you know? It's like, oh yeah, 1980 Star Wars. We're here. Excellent. Good. Yeah.
I love it. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because I always appreciate when they can sort of weave, if you'll forgive the
some of the the smaller stuff that I thought they weaved into the narrative in an interesting way. Master Soul, so we talked about it last time, Soul the sun, right? So this whole ascension ceremony is happening in front of the twin moons.
Yeah.
Right. And the idea that May is the one who wants to stay in the moonlight and Osha's rejecting her and wants to kind of go to the sun in that way. The twin moons, an inherent kind of, it rhymes with our twin sons of Tatooine in a really fun and powerful way. You can feel all of the mirroring there. And then the triangles, Taylor. Like, this is a real like deep cut Star Wars nerdery thing, but I have talked a lot about playing the Star Wars Old Republic video games, Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, and especially the Old Republic MMO. I have put way too many hours in. Don't ask. Holocrons, Taylor. Holocrons were this thing from the old era, from the Old Republic. So Jedi holocrons are these cubes, and they've been featured prominently in a bunch of video games outside of the Knights of the Old Republic. Sith holocrons are all pyramids. They're all triangles. I know a pyramid's not a triangle. It's got 4 sides. I'm a professional Dungeons and Dragons player, okay? I get it. But if we look at it in 2 dimensions, it's a 3-sided object. It's not a quadrilateral. So triangles everywhere. The fortress that you were talking about, like the whole shattered fortress in the mountain is in the shape of a triangle. Next to the gaping pit is a triangle. On Anastaea's costume is triangles. Triangles are everywhere, Taylor. Triangles. Yes. So what I'm getting at here for my speculation, if you don't want to hear my speculation, then I guess fast forward 2 minutes in this podcast. But is there a world where Mother Coral, who is not amongst the dead at the end of this, is in fact mind controlling May to make her go kill everybody, set the entire place on fire to blame it on the child, who she then abandons there and comes back years later dressed in a dark, scary Sith mask with a red lightsaber to train her in the ways to tear down the Jedi establishment that robbed her children from her?
I kind of love that. Yes. I'm down with that. Rich, this feels like the passion that I had for our Good Omens villain that I'm still hanging on to.
Remember, I feel like that's probably what's going to happen, but I'm also super ready to be wrong next week.
Right. That's fun though. I love that. I will put that in the back pocket.
Very notably, Taylor, at the end of the episode, I'm sorry, I keep mixing them up. May gets back to the Jedi ship. Master Soul, like, she wakes up with this gas mask on. This is a
You mean Osha?
Yes, Osha. I'm talking
Yeah.
about OSHA. I thought
You're
I
talking about
corrected
OSHA.
myself.
You
OSHA.
you you corrected yourself the
I
wrong way.
started and then I
You
corrected
started
backwards.
correctly.
What do you want from me? They're both very cute children.
Also, can I say just quickly the
Yeah.
names Mayho and Verosha? Very cool. I really loved the like full name reveal at the ceremony. Thought that was cool.
I love that you love it. I did
Yeah,
not take note, clearly. I was
fair
way
enough.
too fixated
Yeah.
on the triangles.
I'm too rich. As much as you're a professional dungeon master, I'm a professional note taker, and you know I'm writing down all the
Yes,
names
you
all the
are.
time.
Write down all the names, you guys. All the names. But very notably at the end, as OSHA is waking up on the Jedi ship with
Yeah.
their little gas mask on, our boy Padawan Torben in the background, his eye is half gouged out of his head. He's got the catastrophic scar that we're going to see
Oh.
on him in the future. So some shit went down. That much is very clear.
Oh.
And I think that we're going to get to see what went down next week. And I think it's probably going to satiate my need for lightsabering. So hopefully that both those things will happen. And we'll come back next week to talk about episode 4 with some further clarity on the events that transpired in this witch's temple a long time ago.
I'm down. I love it. I'm so thankful that you caught all these little things. I definitely like missed them on that first pass. I was so invested in what was happening with these girls, with Osha, especially after the soul speech and Mother Anastasia like being kind and understanding to her child who wanted something different that she might have been planning for. Um, yeah, I'm very excited for next episode. I love the show. Star Wars Witches is like, hi, I'm here for it.
I think that this episode had a couple more warts than I focused my energy on today. Like there were a few pacing issues. We spent a lot of time with the kids, and while some of those scenes I thought were really elevated, some of them were okay. We're spending some time with the kids. I didn't come out of this one feeling that it's as overall strong as the first two, but I do feel like it's a really important step in the process, and it gives me some confidence going forward. I hope I wasn't too defensive of the Jedi. I'm really excited about a nuanced perspective, and I think that the worst decision or the worst resolution we could come out of this with is the Jedi are bad, the witches are bad, May is bad. I think like those are the answers we should not be driving to. This is a very complex, perilous moment. And I expect that we'll see some version of this council of Anastasia talking to the other witches and Coral reacting badly to the idea of her daughter leaving to join the space cops, and the space cops knocking on the door and everything just falling apart despite the best of intentions. And that's really, the heart of what I was digging at. And what I thought you articulated really well is that amidst this ensemble of these 4 Jedi that are being hunted, I don't want to find out that they're all nefarious or that they all acted in a way unbecoming of a person with that much responsibility and that much power. There's this tremendous line where Indara is talking to Anastasia and they're saying this isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who's allowed to use it, right? And I get that that's like a little pedantic for some people or whatever, but I do think to me that's the more compelling thesis of the episode than the idea that destiny isn't decided for you. I think this notion about like who has the power and who's allowed to wield the power is central to what we're going to explore. And it's a way that we can explore the failings of the Jedi without having to indict every one of them as individuals.
Yes, precisely. Exactly. So, and that's the thing too, like I think that it's good TV when we're coming out of it and like you were mentioning in our Discord, like there's a little bit of discourse. People are disagreeing on some things, but we're talking about it and it's gray and people fall in different positions and that's cool. That's the cool thing about it. Everybody has different takes and it's like thought provoking and it's making us curious about this world state, and I think that that's, like, why I'm so intrigued and I'm so in on it, you know? Like, the Star Wars, which is yes, like, of course, I'm gonna be I can't hi,
Dude, you should
I
play
don't like
Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. I think that
mm,
you would dig them,
yeah, they've been
given
on
the
my
witch
list for a
love.
little bit.
Yeah.
But but about the Star Wars universe, like there's a point where it's cool, like, to just and I'm just a person who loves to be a part of those conversations and sit in and listen to people debate about Star Wars and about it could be insert any sort of fantastical world where people are allowed to have different opinions about different things and are allowed to talk about it, and that's the fun of it, I think. So, I love seeing the conversations that are coming out of this, and I'm, like, ready for more. Yeah, I'm excited for next episode.
Me too. We had a lot of good feedback. Nick had said, love the episode, love giving the flashback a full episode and the character driven world building. The ending felt a little rushed and disorienting, but maybe that will prove to be the point. And I think it will. I hope it will. You know,
Yeah.
I very much felt the same. It's such a frantic rush out of the end. Everything from May, it feels so jarring from the kind of moment that Osha ends up back in her room, packing her bags, Anakin style, the visual mirroring Taylor. Like, go watch The Phantom Menace tonight, and it's just so parallel that I really did think it was beautiful. Call me a basic bitch, but I love when Star Wars does its Star Wars things well, and
Yes.
that's part of it is the rhyming and the mirroring, and when it's done effectively, I'm really interested. So I think it's a great setup. I'm really excited for episode 4. I really appreciated your perspective, and I'm really glad that it affected you as positively as it did, because I think there's a lot of people out there in the world that are really bent out of shape about this television show, and I don't feel that bad for them because they're creating their own problems, but I'm glad we're having fun, Taylor.
Yeah, I feel like Rich, no matter what, we're gonna like have fun talking about stuff over here on Screen and
we,
Page.
we are
Gotta say,
generally
we're
we are
generally like positive and having a good time.
we
I
are
think
pretty proficient in that, at the least, Taylor.
that's
Taylor, we will
great.
be back in 1 week's time talking about The Acolyte, episode 4. But until then, where are you at? Where can people find you?
People can find me at Rania422 on the internet, Twitter and Instagram, and mostly we mentioned it a few times in the Screen and Page Club, our Discord, which is in the link tree of our socials and all that good stuff. And I'm on a few other podcasts around these parts, Rich.
Indeed, you are. I am at DM Philly in all the places. You can find me mostly on my favorite hellscape site, Twitter. Your likes are private now. So just ignore that and come directly to the Screen and Page Discord. I'm breaking down The Acolyte with Taylor. We're doing the Wheel of Time book club. We're about to start reading book 2 of the Wheel of Time, The Great Hunt. You should start reading with us and join us as we return at the end of the month with our first book club accompanying book 2. The boys are back in town, Taylor. I said it at the top, but Kevin and I are going to be talking The Boys season 4. Latanya and I are going to be talking House of the Dragon season 2. She and I are going to be getting together at the end of the month to break down The Bear when it returns over at FX. You and I are talking What Did I Miss? What did we miss this week? What did we watch?
We watched Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron.
Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. And it was a journey, my friends. Let me tell you. Next week, we're watching Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Join us on that journey. It is a very good time always. We will be back in 1 week's time. But until then, may the force be with you.